The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
All I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Is that treasonous enough for you yet? There's a lot to say about this. Some has already been said, and said so well that I'm just going to play the people who said it, particularly Neil Cavuto of Fox News. I mean, I have to give credit where credit is due. Man, not just the rant that went viral yesterday, but some other things that he said. I got interested in hearing his perspective, so I want to share some of his words. But just at face value, there are a couple of things that we need to state at the beginning and then make our case. Number one, there is absolutely nothing wrong with seeking good relations, a better relationship with Russia. As I have always said, what matters is, what does that relationship cost? What does it cost for us to have a good relationship with Russia? And the display yesterday by Donald Trump was disgusting. I mean, I don't really have a better word right now. I'm sure it will come to me before the end of this podcast, but he was groveling before Vladimir Putin. And does that matter? It absolutely matters in the context of what is happening. Not so much. All right, here's a second thing before I go into my argument. Number two, what was released by Russia, while it may have simply been emails that were accurate and the context and the content of the emails mattered, what was released by Russia represented interference in our election by a foreign government. Obvious rebuttals that people always throw around. Yes, Ben, but we always involve ourselves in other people's elections. Yes, we do. And will continue to do that. Does that mean that because we are guilty of something that we as a nation should unilaterally lay down our cyber warfare arms and allow other nations to get away with whatever they want to get away with? No, it doesn't work like that, nor should it work like that. The global order, that's like saying that we as the United States, because we were the first to use nuclear weapons, should be willing to allow another nation to use a nuclear weapon on us. It doesn't work like that. But the problem is that we allow these type of excuses to come up as valid rebuttals to digging into the actual problem at hand. The actual problem at hand is not the content of the emails. It's not the effect, if any, because no one has been able to ascertain any measurable effect that these emails had on the election. So this is, and this is as a tangent before I even get to the argument. The tangent is that this does not absolve the DNC, the Podesta, or Hillary Clinton for their mistakes during the election, their intentional mistakes during the election. This does not say that the Democratic Party, that Hillary Clinton would be president if not for Russia. I don't care how many ridiculous people make that assumption or that come to that conclusion online. Your relatives, I don't care. This does not absolve the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton or Podesta, any of the people involved in the 2016 election. It does not absolve them from their mistakes, intentional or otherwise. However, all of that being said, Russia still involved themselves in our election, and to see the president of the United States stand on stage and essentially just grovel and take Vladimir Putin's word over the word of our here's another before I even finish that sentence, because I already know the rebuttal to that, right? So here's another point that I need to make. This does not mean that we champion American institutions, our intelligence community. We don't, because we know the history of them. Number one, we know how problematic they were and how problematic they are. However, and actually, you know what? Before I even say it, let me play what Neil Cavuto said about that exact thing.
It's not about endearing yourself to America's institutions, just not at the expense of praising Russia's institutions.
Well said, conservative commentator from Fox News. Well said. I mean, that's at the core of this, right? We dare not champion, defend, or try to protect the quote unquote honor of the CIA, the FBI, or any other components of our intelligence communities. But my God, why on earth would you then champion Russia's intelligence community? We act. See, there's an assumption that an unspoken assumption that lies at the bottom of many of the rebuttals, many of the anti-Russia gate rebuttals. People who are contrarian to the point where, anyway, though, you know who I'm talking about. You know the type of people that I'm talking about. Those people who, no matter what, they're going to find a way to defend Trump. And usually it hinges on attacking or rightfully pointing out the issues with our intelligence community. And the assumption that lies at the very foundation of that is as an assumed innocence with regard to anyone who finds themselves on the opposite side of the United States, of United States empire, of the United States' military industrial complex, and the United States intelligence community. Whenever the chess pieces of the United States are lined up against the chess pieces of another nation, there's an automatic assumption of innocence that happens on the American left in particular. And this has been picked up. The horseshoe has been very, very interesting here. Horseshoe theory has been very interesting because that same type of justification and explanation has been picked up by the far right. And there's this automatic assumption that anyone who finds themselves on the opposite field of play against the United States has a level of innocence from which we do not draw, or for which we do not draw the same conclusions about their institutions. In other words, to put it simply, if it's the U.S. versus Russia, we have people who will assume Russia's innocent in this, simply because of all the baggage of our CIA and FBI and our military and the United States in general. And that assumption makes up tyrants. I mean, people who are just as imperialistic. They just simply don't have the amount of power that they want to have to carry out their empire. It makes them out to be the heroes. This is how, quite literally, this is how you get Russia being heroic versus being the quite white nationalist styled, hyper capitalistic and, for all intents and purposes, still has residuals of imperialism in its vein. I mean, this is like the only way I can see someone looking at Russia, modern day Russia, not communist Russia, because Russia is no longer communist. Not the USSR, but the oligarchic, hyper capitalistic, white nationalist state, ethno state, Russia. And look at it in a favorable lens, as if it is a paragon of something. For white nationalists, they see it as in America, they see it as a paragon of white nationalism. For leftists, some leftists, a small segment, they see it as, I guess they see it as a countervailing force against American imperialism. But the thing is that Russia is not looking to be a countervailing force to American imperialism. And that's evident from yesterday's summit. And it's evident for other reasons that I will get into in the second part. But the bottom line is this: in the context of all those things, particularly the fact that Russia did involve themselves in our elections, it's almost unbelievable, if it wasn't so believable, And you know, I think I've made my case actually, in my disclaimers and my caveats. I actually made the case, and the case is very simple, right? There's absolutely no reason for us as leftists or people who are anti, American imperialism, people who are anti-America's institutions, particularly our intelligence institutions, particularly how they have been used historically and contemporarily against marginalized communities, both here and abroad. There is still no reason for us to champion Russia in this, simply because they find themselves on the opposite side of the field of play against the United States. It makes absolutely no sense. And yet we find ourselves in an environment where it's simultaneously you have conservatives finally coming to their senses with regard to their president, willing to make statements like Neil Cavuto made on Fox News, Anthony Scaramucci on CNN this morning, saying that the president absolutely needs to reverse course. But the damage may already be done. You see people finally waking up from their stupor, asking themselves how far are they willing to go to allow this president to just be himself and do what he wants to do in exchange for, it's the same exact equation. Conservatives have had to ask themselves, the things that they want to accomplish with Donald Trump, what is it worth? What price do they have to pay? Now, I saw one commentator on, one Twitter user make the comment that it's all about the Supreme Court justices, and there's really no limit to what conservatives are willing to pay in order to get that. But I think yesterday we saw the Rubicon being crossed, where now conservatives are lining up. And again, it's so easy. It's so easy to use the military industrial complex and the war machine, the U.S. war machine, as both as a tool of fear mongering and as a convenient straw man, because the obvious justification or obvious explanation that people will give to this to this awakening of conservatives. And you know what they're going to say, right? They're going to explain it like this. They're going to say, well, of course, you're going to get mainstream media to have consensus around something that's going to benefit the military industrial complex. They all want war. But again, what war? With who? With Russia? Now, I mean, if you were talking about the nations that we're currently bombing, then yes. But Russia? We're nowhere near going to a conflict with Russia, a hot conflict. We could barely, literally look at where we are. We're not going to engage in a conflict with Russia. This is genuinely about what the role of the president is at the very minimum, like at the very bottom. You can't really ask for the president to be a whole lot, because the president doesn't really do much but serve capitalism and serve American imperialism. That's the role of the presidency. In terms of just like the very base, the very foundation expectation of the president of the United States, even the most hawkish of the most hawkish person who wants to funnel all the money to the military industrial complex, it appears as though we found the threshold for those type of people. And it is to not betray the United States of America on foreign soil. And I don't know why that matters. Don't do it here or abroad, but that seems to be the word. You're doing it on foreign soil, and you betray our institutions in favor of their institutions. That's the kicker. He's not, there is no honor in any of this. There's no redeeming virtue in any of this. Donald Trump is not siding with the poor and huddled masses of Russia. Donald Trump is not siding with the poor, with the workers, the working class of Russia. Donald Trump is siding. Wait, I can go even further. He's not siding with the victims of American imperialism. He's not siding with the victims of America's intelligence community. He is siding with the intelligence community of Russia, with the oligarchs of Russia, with the president of Russia, who represents the best interests of not the working class of Russia, but of the oligarchy in Russia. So there's nothing redeeming about Donald Trump betraying our institutions in favor of their institutions. Likewise, anyone who lifts this up as an opportunity to attack America's institutions in favor of what? Russia's institutions. Like literally, that's what's competing. This is what is actually on the field of play. The actual field of play in this battle between Russia and the United States of America is not it's not the big bag empire of America against the noble and honorable working class of Russia. It is our intelligence agencies against their intelligence agencies. And yesterday, the president of the United States sided with the intelligence agencies of Russia at the expense of America in general. If you want to get access to part 2 of this conversation and the next conversation where I discuss Jesse Lee Peterson's video, the slut shaming video that went super viral, go to patreon.com/the BPD show.